Hi, welcome to Discussions of Music, Healing, and Consciousness with your hosts, Chris Noble and Bill Prodsman. In this episode, we're going to talk about sound therapy and more specifically, one of the major tools that sound therapists use, which are crystal healing bowls. What are crystal healing bowls and why are they so effective? We'll be sharing our experiences receiving sound healing through the crystal healing bowls, among other forms of sound healing. We'll get into specifics as to what happens to the brain and what happens to your mind, body, and spirit when experiencing sound therapy. We'll be giving you lots of tips and tricks with how to search for sound frequencies that can help you in your day-to-day life. We'll be talking about these topics and much more, as always, in these open conversations here on Discussions of Healing, Music, and Consciousness. As a musician, one of the coolest things was to start playing piano over top singing bowls.
Yeah.
Like, it kind of blew my mind. I don't know what your experience has been like.
Well, so years ago, I worked with a Tibetan bowl player, and really interesting thing how it all lined up and came into play. But that's sort of the nature of healing music, right? It just kind of evolves. And we thought, hey, let's do this thing, and we'll, concertize together. And we did, and we had such fun with it. I had the grand piano at the time, and no mics. It was all acoustic. It was an amazing experience, actually, to do. And then she moved back to Texas or someplace, and I was stuck in California, and we decided to make an album. So the album was done entirely by just emailing tracks, and there was a guy who played native flutes, and he was on. He took care of the whole mixing and the whole thing. Came out pretty good. It's a pretty decent album. I guess I should probably say it's out there and you can find it.
I was about to ask you, where can I find that?
Spotify, iTunes, whatever your music service is. It's called Equilibrium. Yeah, you can see the three names. It's like the world's longest artist name because the first name is the flute player, Cornell Kinderknecht. Good luck spelling that. But Cornell, who is amazing, and then Jody Roberts, who plays the bowls. I think she's now on the East Coast somewhere, but she's a healing shaman and a Tibetan bowl master and just all this stuff. And Bill Prodsman, Equilibrium. Go for it, everybody. It's out there and enjoy. And there are, I think, 7 tracks, one for each tone of the natural scale, starting on C up to B. Some people think those notes are related to the chakras. At the time, it wasn't in 432 hertz. It was 440, but who cares? The bowls are, all over the place anyhow.
Still super healing.
So super great stuff. Had a great time. And we did the album. We did a couple of concerts, actually, somewhere in Texas. And what a great experience. I mean, I know what it's like to receive that kind of music because I've received much more of it than I've performed. But the act of performing that, I know you know this too, even though it looks like a concert, it's really a healing experience.
Oh, yeah.
And that healing extends to the music makers as well as the music receivers. And what a wonderful thing to be in sync that way, around this thing we call sound healing. And we did one in Texas at a yoga studio, and where was it? It was in San Antonio or someplace. People brought in yoga mats and they just were lying there on the floor,
I love that.
Taking it all in. It was the greatest concert. It's like you weren't even playing for people. You're just playing like with them, just being with them in the space. And what an event that was. So more of that coming up. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the next collaboration I'm doing with an amazing Tibetan bowl. Do we call them masters?
Sure. Sounds good.
Her name, not a master. I mean, it was the whole pronoun thing anymore. Dion Mandel, and I'm looking forward to that. We're going to get together in a couple of weeks and
wonderful.
See what we can do. And to have a grand piano again.
Oh man, you are preaching to the choir. I haven't played one, an acoustic grand, and I don't even want to know how long. It's been a long time though. Damn, it's a special experience playing. I think it's like with anyone, like you don't have to be a piano player or a musician, but we all have our if you're really into cars and you get to drive that Ferrari that you've always wanted to drive, or, if you're really into, I just think of skiing for some reason. My dad's really into skiing. So you get this gorgeous pair of downhill skis. All of a sudden you can feel like you're invincible and, like whatever the hobby that you love and you get the best equipment for it. I mean, it does feel so good,
Totally does.
You're just nerding out.
I love the ability that you have as a skier, at least out here. I'm sure they do it on the slopes up there too, where you can just, take your crappy skis, but you go to the pro shop on the slope and they'll let you demo anything you want.
Yeah.
And that's a great way to spend a day, because you can ski on equipment that you can never afford, but it's beautiful equipment, right? And it gets the incentive put strongly in your place, where you're like, oh, someday I'll own that ski or that boot, whatever.
That piano.
That piano, right?
Which is dangerous, as we both know.
Oh, incredibly dangerous. I mean, decent pianos are upwards of 6 figures now. It's really ridiculous.
I just liken it to, instead of a Ferrari, I'm just going to go for my, Steinway or whatever the heck I want. I don't even know if it's a Steinway that I really want, but I want an epic grand,
Definitely an epic grand.
Yeah. Huge.
Well, maybe we should just talk about great pianos we've played. I could spend a whole hour on that.
We could spend hours on lots of things. One of the other things I did want to talk about the singing bowls, because I've had so many experiences with these singing bowls now that there's absolutely something going on, and different experiences with the Tibetan metal bowls versus the crystal bowls, both very healing. But I've been getting, actually, you'll really appreciate this. I had an experience last week getting a sound. I'm so fortunate here in Vancouver. I mean, so many sound healers out here. A lot of them are new friends of mine. So I'll get invited over to hang out, and then inevitably a sound healing just kind of happens. And I'm down anytime. It's like, kind of get a hit of those good vibes. Anyone got some bowls passing around here?
Really? Better than a fax,
Honestly, better than any medication in my mind. I mean, of course, it's all relative, but it really does stuff to things that are nonverbal. What I find I like about sound healing is it reaches all the areas that there's just no amount of logic or talk therapy is going to get you there. It's all subconscious, under the surface frequency stuff going on. And it just gets right in there. And I feel like it's like, it always feels like a deep scrub, like someone's gone into my brain and just like, with a big, like cleaner of some kind, vacuum cleaner, scrub kind of thing. And just, goes in there and just cleans out all the crevices and all this stuff of like energetic frequency kind of gunk that we accumulate. And these bowls just resonate that way. But my experience I wanted to run by you was actually, I was lying down. The bowl was very close to my head. And then my friend Sushila was singing over top of that. And her voice did this. There's two things that happened. First thing was that I started to hear her voice in harmonies all at the same time, not really any delay. It sounded like she put on a harmonizing effect through a vocal pedal. Of course, that was not happening. This was all no pedals, no nothing. And so first of all, I was hearing her voice 5 times in 5 different harmonies. So it was like 5 of her happening at once. I was, FYI, sober. This is I'm not on psychedelics, because that could totally become more of an auditory, maybe hallucination or experience on psychedelics. Was not the case. I was sober. And so I heard her voice like 5 times over, duplicated almost, but harmonized. So they were different notes, harmonizing.
Was it overtones, or
it must have been like an overtone. It must have been, but
it's triad harmony, where you got like barbershop harmony.
Well, kind of, yeah. Like, I mean, the harmony was less probably major, more of like a minor, almost Middle Eastern scale sort of kind of vibe, right? But so there was that weird effect, which I could not figure out how that was happening to me sonically in that moment. The second effect that happened was I got these natural binaural beats where I started to hear, with her voice, there was this like, she'd sing and then it would be like, like that kind of a thing going.
Yep.
And then it's the same with the bowl. The bowl has that like sort of sound, and then it would start to go like distorted, like and like have this, but it was going into my brain and moving from left to right to left to right in this really intense frequency sort of pattern. And again, it felt like this really intense neurological deep scrub effect going on. And I couldn't figure out how that was happening, but it was pretty amazing. It's happened twice now, getting a sound bath. So
I think you're onto something with the binaurals there, because, whenever a frequency cancels out another one and leaves emptiness and space, you get the binaural effect. So
that's right.
and I've seen this frequently happen where someone will lie on the floor and the bowls will surround them, and they're played like very close to your head, for example, to create, I think, that binaural beat. That I mean, it's such a lousy term. It does describe it, physically. It tells us what's going on, but
the sensations, like it's like a phasing or like an oscillation, maybe is a good word.
Yeah.
And again, it's that, and you feel it literally going from left ear to right ear, but I felt it going through my brain, like through the whole part of my brain, left to right, left to right. So it was like a sonic windshield wiper.
Yeah.
Going,
yeah. Kind of like a flow state of just energy move. And, I'm not a Tibetan bowl expert, but when people talk about them, the people who have studied and really learned them, they refer to them as things like energy vortices or energy amplifiers. And this, by the way, is only true, I'm told, for the ones that were actually made in Tibet. There are newer ones, of course, they're manufactured. And if you're into this kind of stuff and you know about it, you really hang out for the ones that are authentic, the antique ones, right? The ones that were made hundreds of years ago, right? They apparently have more of the I don't even know how to describe it, healing qualities, obviously, than the ones that are mass produced or relatively more mass produced today. And that's not to say that you can't get anything off of those, because sound is sound and it's going to work. But the old ones were the ones that sort of imbued with spiritual healing capability, And so it's not surprising that you would have the experience that you did of feeling the energy move. Especially the bilateral stimulation that goes along with that binaural beat thing. And it was so pronounced, which is awesome, because in that space, science tells us they don't know how it works, but they know that that's a great state for doing deep work, emotional work, mental work. Takes place. The EMDR is what I'm thinking of right now. That eye movement desensitization and reprocessing long-term for a very simple thing, but while they don't know what's why it works, they know that it is that left-right thing across the corpus callosum that you are feeling. But internally, I don't think science can explain how we get that sensation. It's kind of like, what's it called? There's a form of chiropractic where the chiropractor sets up an oscillation along the spine. And NFT, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Don't remember what that stands for, but the idea, I've watched this and I've experienced this myself. You go into the clinic and there's all these people, the chiropractor is sort of dancing around the room, doing these weird hand movements and stuff and touching people lightly in different places. And everybody on the table is like flopping around, but it's a rhythmic sort of a thing. It's like the spine is undulating in rhythm. So I have a feeling that this left to right thing is also an up and down thing. And that it's possible to trigger both of them somehow, which is a very healing thing for us physically, mentally, emotionally, and of course spiritually. So the experience that you've had just sort of resonates for me. It's like, yeah, I want that. Look, let's all do that, right?
I just pictured I just pictured energy going down our spine when you talked about the up and down component. It's like left and right was going through my brain, through the ears, and then when you said up and down, I just pictured all shooting down my spine, which is obviously a huge pathway for lots and lots of energy. All our chakras, systems, and things like that are all on the spine. That's where the Kundalini energy supposedly is as well. So that's interesting that you say that. It kind of gives like a whole full spectrum resonance, I guess.
Yeah. So up, down, left, right. It's 3-dimensional or maybe more.
Probably more. Let's be
probably more. Yeah. And go. I also think it's a lot about the intention of the player, like Reiki, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So once you've been trained or opened, I think is a better word for it. I was opened. Once you're open, the energy flows. And I think for Tibetan bowl players, who are the healers anyway, that's been part of it too. Like part of their opening is to be a conduit for this and to create the kind of sounds that allow the energy to flow. Not that it's flowing from the player to the patient, but that it's just flowing in the room, right? You set up the environment and the energy flows, and you're the custodian of it, but you're not the creator.
The players are so important. I think we like, it's easy to sometimes, science is science, so sound is sound. It's like, yes, it is, but There's a big but, and it's like the practitioner, the performer, the musician, whoever it is so their energy is still a part of that situation, and whatever is coming through them is still coming through them. They are that vessel that's carrying, this beautiful healing music or sounds, but it's really up to them and how they're going to express that. How much are they also getting out of their own way in that experience to allow the most intuitive kind of healing to happen? And then, what's their intention and what kind of frequencies and where are they at on a mental health level and all that kind of stuff. And where that everyone has a frequency at any particular moment, and that frequency, whatever during the performance, their own frequency is going into all the other frequencies that are happening too, right? So there is definitely a big part of the performer involved as well. The other cool thing to think, I was just thinking about with the crystal healing bowl specifically, is it's crystal. And with crystal, my ancient mysteries brain goes haywire, because crystal is, it's a big gateway into kind of rediscovering some ancient high tech back in, ancient times, because a lot of things were built with granite and crystal and infused with crystal. And we just look at that as, oh, that's just old stone building. And it's like, well, okay, that's one way of looking at it. However, if we look at, let's say, Silicon Valley, just right there in California near you, silicone, right? Where does silicone come from? Crystal, right? So if silicone comes from crystal, and everything that we have in every electronic, every computer system, everything that we use today is considered modern technology has crystal in it. Old radios were crystal radios. On film sets, when they're recording all the sound, that sound gets sent to what's called a clock, which syncs it up with all of the images being filmed. And that clock is synced by a crystal. So there's still really high tech stuff that we're using crystal for. It's called piezoelectric energy, and crystals can generate energy and they can store data. That's the two huge things about crystals. So to then bring it full picture here, I'm like, okay, crystal healing bowls, what you were mentioning about people imbuing their vibes, feelings, emotions, and good intentions or not good intentions, whatever it is, into, everything, every object we can imbue all those emotions into, and then they become, what's that word? Not a artifact, but not a mandala, but
I was going to say a hologram.
Yeah, hologram also can work. I was thinking of there's an old ancient term though. Anyway, it's not coming into my brain right now. When you imbue any object with meaning, essentially, it becomes a talisman. A talisman.
Talisman. That's it. A talisman.
That's the one. Okay. Whew, that was going to bug me.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yes, everything can become a talisman in theory, but a crystal healing bowl is made of crystal. Therefore, it's actually storing frequency information. Maybe it's storing emotional information. Maybe it's, so I'm wondering with the crystal healing bowls, with those, I find more of myself drawn to those. That's just my personal experience. I know I have lots of friends that are much more drawn to the Tibetan bowls and stuff like that, but I love the crystal healing bowls. And I think there might be something to do with the whole, crystal storing memory, storing information, all that kind of stuff. And I like that. So I kind of want to tap more into that with the crystal bowls. I that's just a thought, real random kind of thought that I throw in there.
It makes sense because, when you start to think of yourself as a repository of information, a lot of it is at the atomic level. Doing healing at that level is an entirely different thing than talk therapy. Like it's worlds apart, right? So if you want to work at the molecular level, at the atomic level, or even the subatomic level, that's when it gets really fun. And like all of the other healing stuff that's out there, from medicines to chanting or whatever, we've got to find the thing that resonates for us, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not surprised at all by the fact that you resonate for crystal healing bowls versus the Tibetan. I even hesitate to call them healing bowls, because it's like the crystal bowls versus the Tibetan metal bowls, right?
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me at all, because just like there are people who prefer like pot to ketamine.
Right. Yeah.
It's like whatever works for you is the right thing, that you pursue that, right?
Yeah.
Don't be all concerned that, antidepressant Y doesn't work for you and antidepressant Z does. What the heck, right? If you're getting a result, the idea is to become conscious of the result and then to chase that until it shifts, and then chase the next thing, right? And just keep going with that. I just, as a user of crystals myself, I find it's really important to cleanse them. And because they store, right? So you want to start your process with something with a device that's clean, that doesn't have any residual energy in it, or at least as little residual energy as you can. And of course, if you're sharing those crystals with someone else, if you use them all the time and they're yours, that's fine, but cleanse them before the other person uses them. Cleanse them again when they come back, so that you have a clean slate.
How do you cleanse them?
Oh, well, various different things. So I have, I've got in my pocket here. I can show you this. Of course, the listeners aren't going to be able to see it, but there's a little, this funky little spiral is basically a chunk of something that has crystals in it.
Oh, cool.
And acupuncturist.
It looks like a little UFO, the size of a quarter quarter or something like that. Yeah.
And it's got a little copper wire wound into it in a spiral pattern.
It's very cool.
It's a double spiral pattern. But this was given to me by a chiropractor. No, by an acupuncturist when we were doing some energy work. And the idea here is that this cleanses you. So it's a crystal, absorbs other stuff that's in you, and then it eventually needs to be washed as well. So you just set it out in the moonlight, for overnight, and that cleanses it. Isn't that weird?
Isn't that interesting? Eh? And it has to be more like full moon, I guess, or close to full moon.
Yeah. People bury their crystals in sand. That seems to do it. There's probably an infinite variety of ways that you can cleanse crystals.
Use sage, probably.
I don't know.
Maybe not. I don't know.
I would suggest that if the intention is there and you found somebody with a really clear intention to cleanse a crystal, they could probably do it just by being, in proximity to the crystal.
Also a good point.
And if you're starting a business out there and you're the entrepreneurial crystal cleanser, let us know.
Yeah, we'll have some work
the business your way. It's like a knife sharpener, right?
Right? They come down there, ding, ding, ding on the road. Yeah. Here, let me cleanse your crystals.
Exactly. A little push cart.
That's awesome.
So
yeah, there's definitely something to that. Like I've had interesting effects with crystals. It was definitely an area where I was not exactly interested and really had no idea what any of it meant. And I knew that in the spiritual community, a lot of people use them, and that's about as far as it went for me until I had more personal experiences. And then for myself, I'm just such a science geek. It's so funny because I've had such a spiritual, journey in my life. However, it's funny because I used to be an, atheist and like just very, very science oriented, non-religious upbringing and all this kind of stuff. And now I'm like bridging both worlds because, I'm all about the spirituality. Obviously it just is reality, or a massive part of it. And then what we call science is kind of making sense of the third dimensional physical reality that we're in. But when I can find science that does support, and there's so much science that supports spirituality, but also things like, crystals, right? Like why do crystals actually do all the different properties that they do? Well, like I said before, there is a whole, crystals are technology. I mean, that we got to reframe the way we look at these things that grow on planet Earth that we find, in the caves, in the ground, wherever it is, in the oceans, and et cetera. This is still technology. It's still technology, just because we didn't tweak it into making it plastic and metal and look shiny. It's still technology. Where do we get all of our tech? We base it off of nature. We recreate what we see in nature all the time. So when we build our computers, we've been since day one building them off of crystals. And then if you look into the ancient legends of, like Atlantis and things like that, they supposedly were a high-tech civilization powered completely by crystal. And that's, again, using piezoelectric energy, which we know is a thing. If you put pressure on a crystal, it generates electricity and actually heat as well. So, crystals are pretty incredible. So it's funny you mentioned all this because I'm like, I've been absorbing, I find a lot more people's energy more recently, going to certain events and things like that. And I'll come back way more depleted. And the next day I'll be more tired. And I'm like, why am I this tired? It doesn't even make sense as to what I've been doing. Well, It's because I was absorbing a lot of other people's energy, and then not, like you said, with crystals, really important to cleanse them. Well, I think our bodies are no different. We got to be cleansing our bodies in all these different energetic frequency ways. Like with a bowl, like I'm going to be buying one in this next, I don't know, 6 months or so, at least one, because I need it now. I need to frequency clean myself every day. Like, why wouldn't we take a shower every day? We brush our teeth every day. I meditate every day. Why wouldn't I, scrub myself
it occurs
with the
to me
frequency?
Here, you need the neuro loofah. So for anybody that's listening to this, and probably, there are going to be people out there who are like, Bill, Chris, what are you talking about? What's this frequency thing and all that? Remember the old commercial? Is it Live or is it Memorex, where they had the like a soprano singing and the crystal glass, and the glass shattered when she held the note, right? Yep. So if you match the frequency of an item, you can blow it apart. It'll come undone. The molecular structure of the crystal will come undone, or the building, or whatever we've talked about.
Bridge,
before.
Whatever.
But this is a really important lesson, because if you're not conscious of the vibration of what's around you, you could find yourself in a place where you need a bath. You really need to undo that vibration that's hit you, not because it's bad or anything else. Let's be clear about that, but because it's just not yours, right? Maybe you're not ready for it. And I've had that experience where I'm in a place and the energy is so intense that I just don't know how to deal with it. And other people are like blissing out, and I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And then I've been in a place where I'm definitely aware that the energy is on a different level than I am, and then I don't want it, but I can't leave. So whatever the situation, cleansing from that is really important if you're in the work. And even if you're just sort of like a novice becoming aware of energetic stuff and frequency and vibration for the first time, it's good. I almost said it's good practice, but I think it's something more than that, isn't it? It's that rinsing process. It's like good hygiene.
It's good hygiene. It's like good spiritual hygiene.
Yeah. Or maybe even physical hygiene if it's
certainly. I mean, and that's the thing, is like when you're taking a sound bath from some crystal bowls, for example, you are getting the spiritual cleansing and the physical cleansing, because it absolutely moves stuff in you physically. Sometimes
they're locked together, right?
Oh my God. Like when I had my back pain a couple of weeks ago, I put on certain frequencies. Like, so for the people listening too, like this is where it's now come to for me personally, where I'm like, I get so focused now with my frequencies, because I know they all have an effect. Of course, like everything is in a state of vibration. Therefore, when you match that vibration, you can manipulate these things. So for example, back pain has a particular frequency that the cells in your back are now operating in, which is where you feel discomfort. So this is a very common thing. Most people suffer at some point in their life from some sort of back pain. So when I go onto YouTube or Spotify, though I find YouTube still the best kind of database so far for this kind of stuff, to find quick and easy and free, of course, for everyone. And I'll just type in back pain sound frequency. It's amazing what will come up, and tons of options come up. And I honestly, this is the only way that I vouch, or not vouch, but I screen, I guess, what I want to listen to, is I just put it on and I listen for like 10 seconds and see if it's doing something. And if it's not, try the next track,
Exactly. Right.
It's you said with the practitioner, depends on who's putting it together. Sometimes some are better than others. Absolutely. And some are better for some people than others as well. Right.
And, it's a matter of degrees. So, we all know about the autism spectrum. Things are starting to be described as a spectrum, right?
Yes.
Rather than as a point disorder. So the spectrum of healers out there is vast. It's huge. And some of them you'll resonate and some you don't. If you're not getting it with a particular modality or healer or whatever, change the channel, right? It doesn't mean that that's bad. You're just looking for a match. And we are hardwired for that. Like once you become aware that you can do this, it's really kind of cool. It's like kinesiology. Everybody can do that. It takes a little practice to become aware of it. But when you know about like muscle testing and how you can muscle test yourself, and you can muscle test decisions that you make. I voted once by muscle testing.
Hey, that's actually
what happened, right?
Yeah, I like the muscle test. It actually really trips me out how accurate it is.
Isn't it amazing?
It is.
And it's the same thing with frequencies. And perhaps it's a good time to address the whole thing about higher frequencies, right? People like to think of higher things as better and lower things as not so good. I coming from the standpoint of a musician, I always think to myself, well, if I were restricted on the piano of only playing the high frequency notes, I'd have a very limited range of things I could play.
Yeah.
I need the low frequency notes. Like it's part of the balance of the whole thing, right? However, there are certain specific frequencies, like we talked about with right frequencies, or you're talking about with your back, where you want to tune in to those specific ones that do it for you at that moment. Like you're dealing with cancer cells, there's a frequency for that, right? It's pretty high. We can't hear it. It's beyond our range of hearing, but it works. It doesn't mean that that's an ultimate frequency, because the 40 hertz frequency of, supporting our memory is a pretty low frequency, relatively speaking. And it has this marvelous purpose too. So I'm saying this to sort of set up the conversation around, if you're out there and you're questing for higher frequency or higher consciousness or whatever, don't be too constrained by the term high and the term low, because what you want is to find resonance, find where you vibrate, where you resonate for whatever that is. Doesn't matter if it's a low sound or a high sound, right? But your resonance does matter. And the fact that you resonate on a low frequency doesn't mean anything's wrong, right? That's the frequency that you need. The fact that you resonate on a higher frequency, the frequency you need. It has nothing to do with what your consciousness is. You could have a very elevated consciousness and need some very low frequency work.
Yep. 1,000%. Well, what we need to be careful of is our English language, because it is so limited. And it's actually, I was listening to a fantastic talk by Dr. Greg Braden about language and how he's done some really amazing research on different indigenous tribes around the world, and how their language is so different in terms of how it explains reality. And I won't go into this as a whole other conversation, but what the conclusions were basically that our English language is actually limited to the third dimensional reality. And it doesn't even it literally isn't designed to explain things of any higher dimensional realities, essentially. And also it explains things from a basis of separation, an assumption that we're all separate, that nothing is connected. And it's actually, it bleeds into the language in many, many ways. And again, these indigenous languages are completely connected. So the way that they would describe, if I'm like, oh, look at that seal in the water over there, they would say something like that. Again, I'm going to translate something that is not going to do it justice, and I'm saying it in English, but something to the effect of, if we say it in English, look over there, there's a seal in the water, it would translate in the indigenous language of like the water and the seal are one or something, instead of it being look over there.
Instead of the separation,
instead of their separation, it's like it's all oneness, essentially. And the way that you would describe that situation would sound completely different in that language, because you're coming from an assumption or a basis of connectivity rather than disconnection, which is where English comes from. So, once again, when you say, oh, I'm feeling, this is something I've almost removed entirely, or I try my best to, is removing good and bad. Because when I'm like, how are you feeling today? I'm like, I don't know. I'm not feeling great today. I feel kind of bad would be the old word I would use. I'm like, well,
right. Yeah.
First of all, if I'm feeling, let's say, low energy, and maybe we'll call it even low frequency, that means that I'm processing something, and I'm going through a place of perhaps rest and rejuvenation. And so my body is naturally going to be vibrating at a lower frequency, because it needs rest, rejuvenation to process whatever I'm processing. I'm just using an example here, but that's one very good reason as to why you might feel a little down one day. And is that so bad? No, we can't always be in constant bliss. I mean, maybe when we exit this body after we die, apparently that's what it seems to be like. And that's cool. I'm down for that experience later on. But like right now in this current physical reality, we have our ups and downs for a reason. We can't, when we're down, this assumption of it's bad, it's negative, or this idea of lower frequencies being a bad thing. I'm not ascended. I'm not super spiritual if I'm feeling low vibrational today. No, it's actually all a part of it. We have the yin and the yang, the good and the bad, the dark and the light, and male and female, etc. Day and night. All this duality is there for a reason. So, I guess maybe to summarize, I'm just thinking like, the language you got to be really careful with the language that we use with how to describe, well, what kind of frequency do I need today? Oh, I'm not feeling great today, so maybe I'm just feeling depressed. No, maybe you're not necessarily depressed. You're just you're processing something, and you won't be able to probably articulate what it even is that you're processing. I've been finding recently, I've been feeling certain ways, and I'm like, I have no bloody idea why I'm even feeling like this right now. I can't logically figure it out, but guess what? I'm going to go home. I'm going to play some music, play some sound frequencies, maybe type into YouTube how I'm feeling and put sound frequency beside that and see what comes up. Maybe I'll play it on the piano. It depends on how I'm feeling, but I'll do something frequency related about it, because it will get into those areas that I can't articulate. I can't even logically think what the hell it is, but it's there because I can feel it. And those frequencies, man, that's where they work best, is with the things that we can't even describe or explain. I find it's really good for that.
Yeah, language is such a clumsy thing, isn't it? I love. We should put a link to the Greg Braden talk somewhere in the show notes, but people can find it. I mean, it's Braden's easy to find.
He's easy to find, but this came from a specific podcast that I love called Earth Ancients. It's all about ancient wisdom and ancient mysteries. And I'm going to make a note right now in our podcast note to put that. So it's going to be a link to that podcast that I was listening to.
Sweet.
With Greg Braden, and I'll put a note in the show notes. People can skip to probably 20 minutes in. It's where it gets good. But anyway, I'll make those notes in the show notes, because I am also being, for the listeners and for you, Bill, I'm also going to be way more due diligent on keeping notes of the things we talk about, so people can get more links in the discussion in the thing below. So I'm staying up on that anyway.
Absolutely. Hey, if you're listening and there's something that you heard that you want us to provide a link for, do that. We'll just drop it in the description on YouTube, and then you can get it. Great, so this language thing, this has been really bothering me. Language, of course, is hard because you have to describe spiritual stuff using physical terms. And poets are great about this, like looking for the concrete image, right? That image that is so grounded in reality that's at the same time so spiritual, or at least it opens you to the idea of a bigger thing. I can't think of a poem off the top of my head right now, but any poem that you read, if it doesn't have that component, check it twice, right? Because it may not be poetry.
I mean, the first quick thing that came to my mind as an example, Bill, would be like Rumi, who's, one of the things he said that I always loved were, the cracks are where the light comes in, meaning, the things that we call our faults or our traumas or our wounds, those are the places where we find the light, so you find the light in the shadow, which tells you, again, it's just a reaffirming message on the shadow work or doing work on those really difficult, traumatic parts of your life. That's where the real development happens. So the cracks where the light comes in, I find, is a great poetic way of describing it, because you're right. We're so limited. By language.
Isn't it in the Jewish tradition, the Torah has like 5 levels of meaning, and only one of them, the first one, is literal. And then you just have to sort of descend through the levels of meaning to get to what it's really after, which is, of course, why all the rabbis are so intrigued by the thing and talking about it so much, to uncover what those levels might be. And that's even more remarkable too, because when you think about those ancient languages, like the language in which the Tao was written, right? So in that language, which is infinitely, I think, more spiritual than English, and certainly not constrained by the noun verb kind of things that we have, which are a separation right there. Can you imagine what it must have been like to hear the early teachers speak in that language of these things that we only now have this clumsy transliteration of in English? I have a friend who's a preacher, a Christian preacher, and he's very into the Aramaic Jesus, the Jewish, the Jewish man who lived at that time and spoke in these words. And the trouble of translating out of that kind of spiritual language into a more grounded English language is huge. And so much of it has been lost, of course, along the way. Lost in translation is what we say, because it is. I mean, you cannot adequately convey the metaphysics of a concrete thing even in the language that it's in, let alone translating it like from Aramaic to whatever, Hebrew to Greek to English. I don't know how that went because I'm not a Bible scholar, but it's a fascinating thing. And uncovering the beauty of what is meant is something that I'm really concerned about, especially because of the insistence of Google on having language that is constrained for computer consumption.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone's ever written a poem that's SEO optimized.
Pretty sure not.
Right? And yet there are writers out there who are popular, and they're popular and people read their stuff, not because it's optimized, but because it resonates.
Yeah.
When Google figures out how to like grok language that resonates, I'll be on. But until then, I'm ignoring everything about SEO. Right?
Yep. I also bypass Google. I use a different search engine called Ecosia, if anyone's ever heard of it. You plant a tree every time you search, actually, Ecosia. That's another thing I'll put in the link. It's got nothing to do with sound music here, but
it's an improvement of consciousness.
And that's where it fits in.
Right. So
we need to plant trees. The world needs more of them anyway. And it's a really cool initiative. It's also a B corporation. B corporations are really, really interesting because they're allowed to profit. They're allowed to make money, but all of their financial records and stuff are public. And like basically it's full transparency. They can't really hide what they're doing. So they get to tell you where the money's going, and you can look at I think they have monthly financial forecasts. You can look at on their web. Jane Goodall is a huge endorser of them, and it's pretty cool. So it's a search engine. Every time you're searching, you plant a tree, or at least you plant like half a tree or something. Anyway, it's a pretty cool thing. So Ecosia, Ecosia.
That's awesome, man. I'm going to change.
Awesome.
It's time we had more options than, remember when Windows was new, and the only thing you could get to work was Windows Explorer, whatever it was called back then.
Yeah, the web browser, yeah,
the web browser. And now they're ditching Explorer finally. But why be locked into something that everybody else uses if your whole purpose in life is to advance consciousness? Why stick your foot back in the quicksand every time you want to search for something when there are alternatives?
There's alternatives for everything. And that's the beauty right now of the day and age we live in. There's alternatives for everything. So if there's stuff you're doing there, you're like, I just don't really like how I'm doing that, then just, you look it up on Ecosia, and see what you have out there. Same with sound, all the healing modalities we're talking about, find what really gets you going. It might be none of these things. You might really get into Tai Chi. You might really get into Qigong, like movement-based types of medicines in a sense, like I was talking to you about last week, dance, that type of therapeutic movement I find so incredible. I'm just going to mute myself for a second. We got a siren coming on here.
That's all good. All good. We're so raw and authentic here. Even the sirens and the dogs barking and whatever other noise is going on in the room. I was making a voiceover yesterday, and there was this cartoon playing on the TV, and I thought, I'll just leave that in. But ultimately I didn't. And of course, the universe came along after I'd asked my teenager to, mute the thing, and supplied other noises. So, there's a dog barking, there's a helicopter, there's a siren. It's like, come on, I'll just go with it. It's all good.
You're living in the city. I've all my friends who work in voiceover and musician friends too, who are always looking for silence to record. I'm like, you can do a lot of things with sound dampening or move into the wilderness.
Yeah, it's true. Right. Right.
And I guarantee you the wilderness is always going to sound better because you just have so much less to compete with. And it's super peaceful. Like I really look forward to having a studio in the middle of nowhere. One day I might probably go in with a couple of other musicians and just have this, middle of the nowhere, beautiful studio where it's just silence and tranquil nature, and imagine what you create there. Cause that goes back into environment playing a huge role in the creation, like you're saying, those ancient Tibetan bowls where in the past, especially in more distant past, we built things differently. We did things with so much different intention, probably a lot more intention at that time was put into it with the knowledge of if I love this thing, this device will feel that love. Well, we actually know that now through, again, some scientific experiments that's totally valid. But imagine that same idea, but for the cathedrals that people would worship in, or the temples, right? Where thousands of years they may have been around for, where people have imbued it on an almost daily basis of love, grief, sorrow, happiness, bliss, everything else in between. And so these places, when you walk into them, there's a reason why they're so awe-inspiring. Yeah, the architecture typically is all the sacred geometry and it looks utterly gorgeous. But then you're feeling the frequencies and the emotions of all of these people who have through centuries or millennium just poured their heart and soul into this environment. And then that's what's picking up that place, which you can't recreate. Like me meditating in an ancient temple, doing the exact same meditation back in my apartment here in Vancouver ain't going to be the same. I'm telling you right now.
I've had that experience with I think I've been to 3 heiau, the holy places on the Hawaiian Islands.
Oh, amazing.
And it's really weird. I can't explain why I'm so drawn there, but whenever I am anywhere near one, I make the effort and go and just be in the place for a little while. And I think it's because of that. It's because those are places where people have brought their sacred selves for centuries, and that energy doesn't leave. You enter that in a very conscious way when you're there. It's not just a big park or a beautiful cliff. You're actually going into a temple, which in Hawaii is basically just either flat rocks or an open field, or maybe it's surrounded by a jungle and a clearing surrounded by the jungle. But the energy of that place is so present. Oftentimes I leave energized, and sometimes I'll leave sort of sad, some melancholy. Mm-hmm. And Mother Kauai is my favorite island. And I think it's for that reason. It's because there's some connection there that somehow works for me. Like you've just discovered that you need a crystal bowl now because that works for you, right? So it's like, what a wonderful thing to be in that place. I've had that experience in cathedrals too, Gothic cathedrals. I don't think I've been to anything older than a Gothic cathedral. You probably had that in the pyramid.
Yeah, well, Egypt was activating on so many levels. And the healing, and much like you said, sometimes I'd leave being like, wow, it's actually pretty overwhelming. Sometimes I'd leave with I remember the Temple of Hathor, she's the goddess of basically unconditional love and feminine, feminine maternal love, essentially. And you walk into that huge temple. I mean, the ceilings are 40 feet high. Not 40 feet high, 20 feet, 25 feet high, massive. You start to also recognize wow, this is where every other temple almost in the world was based off of this temple. You can really see where everyone got their ideas. But you walk in there and it was the warmest frequency hug, I just felt this huge embrace. Everyone just became so much quieter inside. You weren't told to be quiet. It just happened naturally. Everyone kind of just was like, wow.
Yeah.
And you just left feeling this cosmic hug.
Have you ever been in a redwood circle or an oak tree grove?
Well, closest for me was here on Vancouver Island. There's some of those massive trees you can park a plane inside. I've had that experience, but not the redwoods in California, which I would love to experience.
That would be a great place to set up an acoustic music. But in that grove, they grow in a circle. I don't know why. And these massive trees. And sometimes the circles will be 80, 100 feet across, surrounded by these giant trees. The other cool thing is when one is burned and you can actually go inside it, not drive your car through it, but actually walk upright into a burn spot on a redwood tree. And you just feel this sense of presence I can't describe it any other way. The California scrub oak does that too. They'll grow in a circle and all the leaves will sort of compact whatever's in between them so that the middle of the circle, this empty place, it has nothing growing there. But it's surrounded and overhung by these oak trees. And it's almost like being in a room.
It must feel so surreal.
It's incredible.
Very peaceful, but also I feel activating, or you could kind of like a vortex,
yeah Kali is right there, right, just ready to destroy whatever you bring in that doesn't fit.
So true.
Just waiting.
Oh man, that's magical.
I was thinking as you were speaking a little while ago about our Western sensibilities, which sort of grew up around repeating other notes that people had written. Mm-hmm. It's not true for jazz, of course, but we sort of get an idea and then we eventually expound on that and make it our own. But in the East, isn't it much different? Where I got to hear Ravi Shankar play once. And right from the start, I didn't get the feeling that he was reproducing anything. Now, maybe he reproduced a melody, like there's a melody that runs through, motif, like the Icaros or something, like a motif that people would recognize. But the idea seems much more Eastern than Western, to be able to take an idea and just allow it to flow, and to go with wherever it takes you, with whatever your talent might be, to be in that. I'm thinking of Rumi again, the Whirling Dervishes, right? And the music that would accompany that was inspired, but not necessarily inspired by a specific composed structure, right? The Western structure of start and finish wasn't a part of it. It was much more of a, things just get started and all of a sudden we're doing this thing, right? And then it goes on for a long time, right? And then it ebbs and it flows and it does this and it does that. And eventually everybody's tired. And so we stop and we do it again, right? We've spent the energy and then we start again with new energy. And that kind of experience, at least it seems to me, Chris, is one that in the West, we could be welcome to. We could open more to that and allowing that to take place. And, I kind of think we see that in stuff like raves and whatever, and certainly bands like Fish and the Grateful Dead and whatever, who are doing freeform stuff. But that's the way that healing music works here in the West. And to bring more people into contact with that free-flowing, I don't want to say unstructured, because it isn't structured.
Just different structure.
Different structure, yeah. Crystal structure. I don't know. Holistic structure. Yeah. Hologramic structure, or whatever the structure. That isn't really what matters, but the experience is what matters. And it might be new for you if you've never done that before, but seek it out, because it's such an amazing opportunity, to experience sound in a new way, and perhaps a way that's inspiring or maybe challenging or difficult or beautiful, whatever your response to it is. Like, just go with that, because it's just music and it's not going to hurt you. It's going to change your effect when you leave, of course, but seek that, go looking for it, whether it's on YouTube. But now that we're able to go into the room again, try to find live events where that happens, if you're listening to this, because it's a live event. It's so much more, gosh, here we are stuck with
palpable,
language again.
Our visceral,
visceral, like a full body experience.
It's very much a full body.
Like when I went to hear Owl City, and the beat was so big that it was just making you jump around. And that kind of experience happens in a healing concert too. It's not quite as violent
or aggressive,
but it's available. And now that we can actually go out and be in the place where that music happens, I do that, right? Because it'll change you in a good way. And
I'd say, just to add on to that, Bill, I think for people looking, okay, it might be hard to necessarily find artists. Like, I'll tell you, if you come see, I'm sure many of Bill's shows or my shows, you're going to get some nice improvised plays with structure. Like, I have some things where I stick to a solid structure, and I'm very conscious to also make sure that a good amount of the performance is improvised, because I want to be flowing and channeling, so to speak, at that very moment for people too. Like, I want them to experience like a real time, improvisational, whatever magic that comes out. But so I kind of do a bit of a mixture. But for people who are like, well, what's a guaranteed kind of live event that I can get that? Honestly, sound baths, because my friends who are all sound healers, they have a bit of a structure that they go by, especially because if the events are, for example, we're celebrating the equinox, or we're celebrating certain things, like there might be themes, right? Okay, well, because of the themes, they're going to have a particular structure, but it's still very much a structure to allow a lot of free flow, because what they're doing is they're also tapping into the energy of everyone in the room and seeing where they're at, and then adjusting their performance / practitioning, whatever you want to call it, because it's really a bit of both. It's sort of like music, and it's sort of like medicine, or something that you'd receive with a doctor or a therapist. So with that being said, it really has that feel of it unfolds. And as you're likely lying on the ground on a yoga mat, just blissed out, maybe with a blanket on, you're like so comfortable, feeling like these amazing frequencies just bathing you. It's great, because you're going to receive that experience that Bill's been saying, where you really feel like, you don't know, but you feel like people are just making this kind of up as they go in a way, but you're also going to they'll have some kind of structure, but that I would say is a guaranteed type of sound event that you'll get that improvised sort of feel, or like Bill also mentioned, go catch a jazz show.
Yeah, really. Find your favorite jazz cafe.
Just go to a jazz bar,
There's got to be, I almost said Google it, Ecosia, this sound bath, and see what you can find in your community. They probably won't be in venues that you think of as a concert venue, but I know yoga studios, very common. Yeah, you can get this stuff, and most of the time it's not too expensive. If you've never done it before, treat yourself, right? Try it as something new and just see how it goes.
It's a treat.
It really is, and of course you won't recognize the music, so that's another thing too. Is an opening to some new experience of sound that you may not have never had before, right? And what an amazing opportunity that has.
I always meet cool people too. It's one of those funny things too. I met my last girlfriend at a sound bath. I met like some really amazing people at these events too, which is of course another beautiful thing of concerts, things like that, where you just end up making friends with strangers because you're really both there for an amazing experience and you get to share that together. That's always fun too.
Oh, it's completely amazing, especially if you're there with someone that you're connected to already.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That kind of the connection that evolves out of a sound healing or a sound bath or it's so different than a concert, but it's equally great. And I keep saying, but you don't until you've done it, until you've experienced it, you don't really get it. And what a wonderful thing it is to do that, whether you're, playing for it, which is also like I felt that Ravi Shankar was participating in his own healing as he was playing the thing, right?
That's cool.
You kind of get that, you feel a oneness instead of a separateness at these events. And I feel that in Western music too. But specifically when the intention is there, you feel this oneness. And that's, I don't know, just part of the beauty of being in the musical space, I think.
It's oneness. I think we can kind of sum up everything we've been talking about in a way back to oneness, because what we're complaining about with the English language, there's a lack of connectivity with it, right? It's all separation. But with music and these experiences that we're talking about, it all comes back to oneness, all comes back to, with everything going on in the world, it's like we're categorized and divided on everything and then more every day. And that isn't healthy. We need to find all the ways in which we come together. Our differences are the best part. Our differences is what makes this so much more interesting and so much more eclectic and fascinating and fun and cultural and interesting and much more color and taste and flavor, that gets added with all our differences. Thank God we have differences.
Yeah.
I'd be so bored if we were all the same. What is the point? What are you going to learn from each other if you have no differences? We got to celebrate those differences and then find all of our commonalities. And one of the beauties of music is it cuts through everything. You get every walk of life coming to certain concerts and certain music, and especially with sound healing too. You really what is that of a genre? I don't even know what it is. So you just get everyone who's curious about it showing it up from all ages and all walks of life, and you all experience the universal language of sound and vibration and frequency, and that's where we all come back to the same source of creation. We're all vibrational beings, right? So
one giant collective vibrating crystal.
Master crystal at the center of the earth.
The center of the earth.
Yeah.
And we're all just sort of like poor containers for the ultimate beings that we are anyway. So walk your poor container over to a crowd of others who are doing sound healing, and you can experience some of that ultimate beingness together.
Oh yeah. It's just nothing but oneness. Those are the experiences I'm seeking from now until I transition out of this life. It's the best. Makes it worth living.
Truly. Not quite as good as chocolate, though. I'll have to say that. There's a vibration about chocolate that's.
Well, that's another episode. We can get into cacao and all the amazing stuff that comes with chocolate and cacao. And oh man, I have a solid dark chocolate addiction too. So there you go.
Yeah, right. Thank you for listening in on our conversation and for taking time to show your appreciation with a like, share, or subscribe. Discussions of music, healing, and consciousness is a practice of spontaneity and we welcome your comments, ideas, and questions. There are ways to connect with us in the show notes, so let us hear from you. Until next time, this is Bill Protzman along with Chris Noble wishing you great musical health. Samara Huchaya.